technical difficulty. Thank you to everyone joining our Jamf School webinar with myself and Nick Chetham. Just a quick introduction to myself, people that don't know me. My name is Gary Collins and I'm the Technical Lead MDM Consultant Academia. If you have any MDM related questions regarding services, please reach out to me. I will put my details in the chat box on the right for you. After the session ends, we will be doing a quick Q&A session as well. So please feel free to leave any questions in the chat box on the right. I will tag this as a question and then I will read them out to Nick at the end. Please be aware that there is a 10-second delay between the presenters and the viewers, so we apologise in advance for any awkward silences. So it's better to ask the questions now. I'll now hand you over to Nick Chetham, who is Business Development Engineer for Jamf, who will be presenting for us today. He's got lots of great things to go through. So Nick, take it away.
Thanks, Gary. So hopefully everyone can hear me. Hello, welcome to this webinar. And thank you for Academia for inviting me along today. Our mission at Jamf is to help organizations succeed with Apple. And today we're going to look at how we do this in education, specifically with our product, Jamf School. As Gary said, we'll have some time at the end for Q&A. So if you have any questions, please use that chat window. Gary, keep an eye on that for me. And at the end, we'll do our best to answer any questions that you might have. So my name is Nick, and I'm the Business Development Engineer at Jamf, specifically focused on education, and I cover the EMEA region. So I've been at Jamf for over 4.5 years. Prior to then, I worked for Apple. I've also worked for an app development company, helping to test and deploy their apps in education and in schools. And then before that, I was trained as a teacher of computer science, teaching secondary K-12 level in the southwest of England. So I'm really grateful at Jamf as it gives me the opportunity to combine my love of Apple technology, my experience of deploying Apple devices, and my passion for teaching. So Jamf has a product portfolio specifically designed to help us with our mission of helping organizations to succeed with Apple. We have Jamf Connect, and Jamf Connect delivers a streamlined Mac authentication and identity management, leveraging credentials from a cloud-based identity provider in order to provision a Mac device. We also have 3 management tools. We have Jamf Now, which is our management tool for the SMB market. We have Jamf Pro, which is our flagship management solution that's been around for about 18 years, primarily focused on the enterprise. And also Jamf School more recently, our education-focused management solution. We've recently enhanced this with a tool called Jamf Protect, which is an enterprise endpoint protection solution for the Mac. And behind all of that sits Jamf Nation. Jamf Nation is the largest online community of Apple administrators, so we're well over 100,000 current active members. Chances are if you're looking for any information when it comes to managing an Apple device, you'll probably find the answer on Jamf Nation. You don't have to be a customer to sign up to that, so I encourage everyone to have a Jamf Nation account and go and see what resources you can find on there. So with that being said, today we're going to be looking at Jamf School specifically, our education-focused management solution. And when I'm talking about Jamf School, what is it that I'm really referring to? Simply put, this is it. This is Jamf School. It's a web-based server that you can log into in order to centrally manage all of your Apple devices in your school. Traditionally, a tool for the IT department to use in order to set up and provision the devices. What I'd like to look at today, though, is how we're taking this tool that was traditionally used by IT and we're putting it into the hands of the end users to try and empower the teachers, the parents, and the students with Jamf. We do this specifically with 3 iOS applications. That's our teacher application, our student application, and our parent iOS application. And as I said, the idea behind these is to take that tool that's traditionally been used by the IT department, an MDM, a mobile device management solution, to centrally manage all of your Apple devices, and actually involve the other stakeholders, the teachers, the parents, and the students, as they're the ones actually using the devices, and they actually could do with a lot of the ability that MDM provides. So taking a look at our 3 applications, I'd like to take each one individually and just take you through some of the top features and some of my favorite features of each application. We're going to start with the teacher app, the Jamf Teacher iOS application. So primarily, as you can see from that shot there, that's what it looks like. And the idea here is that we can set and or clear restrictions. So a teacher is able to actually restrict the device. Maybe during a lesson, I want to be able to restrict the camera. I don't want the students to be able to use the camera during that lesson. And as a teacher, I can turn on and off that camera without having to go and ask IT to do that for me. Further to that, I'm also able to actually install applications. Perhaps there's an app that's missing from the devices that I know is available, or perhaps I'm setting up for a class and I notice one or two devices is missing the app that I need. As a teacher, I'm able to actually go in and install that app remotely from my teacher app onto those devices. And we also have the ability to lock into an app or a set of apps. I remember back when I was teaching, we didn't actually even have the ability to do things like guided access that's built into iOS. The best thing that I could do was to ask the students to please turn their iPads upside down and place them on the table in front of them. Well, thankfully, we've come a long way, and Jamf's built upon this by being able to actually allow locking into a set of apps. And we'll take a look at that in more detail shortly. Using the teacher app, you can also actually message with students. So you can help an individual student with a question. You can see in the window there on the right that a teacher is able to have a one-on-one conversation with a student. When I was a teacher, I had a student in my class with selective mutism. And it's quite a rare disorder, but it meant that actually he wouldn't speak to anyone outside of the home. He would only ever talk at home with his mum. The solution the school had for this was to give the student a whiteboard and a dry marker pen, and he'd sit on the front row of every class he was in, and he would just write his question and hold it up. This was literally about 4 or 5 years ago, and that's the best solution that we had for him. Obviously, he was then subject to bullying from the other kids in the class. He had to sit on the front row of every class he was in. And me as a teacher would often struggle to read his handwriting and have to ask him to rewrite that question. All in all, not really the best experience for that student and challenging for myself as well as a teacher. Using the messaging feature, something as simple as text messaging, but embedding it into the Jamf Teacher app, it allows me to have a one-on-one conversation with that student without disturbing the rest of the class. I can ensure the rest of the class stays on task, and I can see if a student needs some support and assistance, and I can actually have a one-on-one dialogue with them in a classroom full of students. As a teacher, I'm also able to plan my lesson ahead of time. I can go into the teacher app and I can see that I'm going to have a lesson with iPads potentially, the next day or the day after that, and I can go ahead and build my lessons ahead of time. I can choose which apps they're allowed access to in that lesson, which websites I want them to have access to, and what restrictions might be placed on that device. This way I can actually custom the iPad experience for the student to the classroom. So if I was to use iPads in a maths lesson and then immediately straight away afterwards in maybe a geography lesson, I can make sure that the iPad is customized to that subject when the lesson begins. What I'd like to do now is just walk you through about 5 of my top favorite features of the teacher app. And that begins with app request, the simple task of actually, as a teacher, requesting an application that I'd like to use in my lessons. Drawing on my own experience when I was a teacher, the way that I requested an app, I literally had to walk across the school. I had to go through 2 or 3 buildings and across a quad to the IT department, who was at the other side of the school. And on the door of the IT department was a piece of paper that said, which apps would you like? Please write them here. I literally had to walk to the other side of the school and write on a door the app I wanted and just hope that someone had seen it and maybe would do something about it. Well, thankfully, we've improved that experience for teachers and made it a bit easier for IT as well. If we take a teacher iPad, I'll just walk you through it. If they go into the App Store and find the app they want, and in this example, we're going with Math Learner app, the teacher's able to use a button they're pretty familiar with, the Share button, and that loads up Teacher app. Within the Teacher app, we can choose which lesson we want this app for, which students are going to be using this app, and the reason why we need it. This request is then sent off to the IT department who have access to Jamf School, and they can track and monitor that request. The teacher is able to get updates on their app request through the teacher application. You can see there's a pop-up notification here. They can go to the app request and they can monitor the status of their app request. A much nicer experience all around, I think, for both the teacher and for IT. The next feature I want to touch on is Ad-hoc Class. So I mentioned a moment ago how if I'm planning ahead of time that I have iPads maybe in 2 lessons tomorrow, 3 in the day after that, I can choose which apps I want, which restrictions, which websites ahead of time, and I can build that into my lesson plan. Well, sometimes I don't have the ability to plan that far ahead. Perhaps I want to just take the iPads and use them immediately with a set of students, and I want to be able to make sure they're only using certain applications and websites. We have a feature called Ad-hoc Class that allows teachers to very easily take the iPads and begin using them with all these features immediately. So if we have a teacher iPad on the left-hand side of the screen and a student iPad on the right-hand side of the screen, the teacher can load up the teacher app, they can tap on the new class icon, and they can give this class a name. And in this example, we have the science class. They can tap on Add Students, and this turns the iPad into a Bluetooth beacon, and then the student gets a pop-up notification on their iPad to join the class. The teacher is then able to see that the student has successfully joined the class. They'll get a list of the students as they join, and then they can then begin to manage those devices. They can choose which apps the students are allowed to use. They could lock it into an app. They could choose which websites they're allowed to navigate to, and they can do all of the features and functionality that they would be able to do had they planned this lesson ahead of time. The other great part of this lesson is now synced back to the Jamf School management system, and that syncs back to Apple School Manager as well. Why is that good? It means that I can reuse this lesson again in the future. I don't have to go back and create an ad hoc class again next week for the same students at the same time. I can simply pick up the class that I created from previously. The next feature I'd like to highlight is App Lock. So being able to lock into a single application. I'd mentioned when I was helping to deploy apps in schools, we didn't have the ability to lock into a single app at the time. So we literally had to ask the students to turn the iPad upside down and place it on the table in front of them. This was the only way I could be sure that the students were paying attention to me. Well, if we take the teacher device, on the left-hand side and the students on the right, inside the teacher app, the teacher is able to select the device or a selection of devices. And if they tap into the app lock and then into that white square, they can see all of the applications available. We're not simply selecting one application, but unique to Jamf Teacher is the ability to select multiple applications. We also have a time where this will clear. So if a teacher ends the lesson and forgets to unrestrict the iPad, they will automatically clear this at the end of the lesson. And you'll see the student device on the right-hand side is now going to be adjusted to only those applications. This way we can be sure that the students are on task and they're not using apps that aren't needed for that lesson. So we've always had this ability, or for the last few years, we've had this ability to lock into a single application, which we can do with Jamf Teacher, but we've added this ability on top of that to select to have a selection of applications. The next one I want to highlight is the attention feature. So as a teacher, I might want to actually ask the students to stop using the iPad for a moment and have eyes up and look at me. I want to make sure that they're not going to continue using the iPad. Maybe there's a row of students on the back row that I can't quite see in there while I'm not looking using the iPad. Well, we have an attention feature for this. So inside the teacher app on the left-hand side, you'll see the teacher is able to begin the class or go into the class that they're using. And they can either select a single device or they can use the icons across the top to select all devices, the blue icons across the top there. And then they can use the attention feature. They can put a customized message in here. And in this one, you can see just eyes up. And again, we have this ability to clear after a certain time. So this really helps the teacher if they forget to manually clear this. And you'll see the student device on the right-hand side goes into a locked state. So the student is unable to press the button and come out of there or navigate to another application. So a teacher can be absolutely sure that no student's using the iPad during a moment where they might actually like to address the class. Makes it really easy for behavior management in the classroom. Another feature I'd like to highlight is Weblock, the ability to navigate students to specific websites. When I was a teacher, quite often I'd set a task to the students, a research task, where I might ask them to go to a website and begin researching some information. Well, actually now we have the ability with Weblock to make this much easier for the student and a bit better for the teacher as well. Inside the teacher app, again, we can go to those features and we can look at Weblock. Weblock allows us to actually specify the URL for a website. And in this example, you can see we're just going to go to jamf.com/education. We're going to make sure they're logged into Safari on this one, and we have that clear time as well. You'll see on the student device on the right-hand side, Safari is going to load. And if the student tries to go to somewhere else like Google, it's not allowed. If they go into the favorites bar, they'll see jamf.com/education is the only listed website. So they can go to the jamf.com/education URL. But they're actually able to navigate around the jamf.com domain as well. So they can click on other areas of the website and navigate around that domain. If they try to navigate away from jamf.com, you'll see that they're restricted. And this is again a feature unique to Jamf Teacher, is the ability to lock into a domain, not just a single URL. Really great as a teacher. So rather than specifying 4 or 5 specific URLs that I want the students to go to, I can specify a domain, and then they're able to go off and do some research around that domain. Perhaps I want them to go to a popular news website and research some current events and some current news around a topic. They're able to actually do an investigative and research task, and I can just specify that domain. So those are my real top features, I suppose, of the Jamf Teacher application. And one thing that I'd like to add is that everything that you've seen, except for Ad-hoc Class, runs across Wi-Fi. Ad-hoc Class uses a Bluetooth in there as well, so the devices need to be within range of Bluetooth. But everything else you've seen runs via Wi-Fi. And why is that good? Really helps in a remote learning environment. If you have students that are learning from home, as a teacher, I can actually have a video conferencing call with those students if necessary. It's been very popular recently. But the teacher's actually able to manage those devices as if they were in the same room together. So you can make sure that all the students that have joined your virtual classroom are actually using the applications and only going to the websites that you've specified. Provided they have an internet connection, everything will be working perfectly like you've seen. One question I get asked quite often is, this is a lovely application, but unlike the students, actually, we don't have the budget and I don't have an iPad. As a teacher, I don't have an Apple device to be able to use for this. Well, we do actually have a web portal. So the web portal provides this functionality through a website that can be accessed on any device. So you see an example of it here. And for those paying close attention, you'll notice the URL on this one is an older URL. That will be changing in the next couple of months. If you're already using this and you want to know how this will impact you, you can reach out to Gary or myself and we'll be happy to explain. Should be minimal impact. We're just updating that URL. But as you can see, a teacher is able to navigate to their school. They can see their classes, lessons, and they begin to manage the iPads in that class and in that lesson from any device that they might have, provided they have a web browser. So that concludes the teacher app portion of what I wanted to talk about. I'd like to move over now to the students and what we're doing with MDM, the tool from IT, and how we're helping students, empowering them with their learning. So the idea is that we want to personalize the device and we want the student to feel as if it's their device and that they have a say in it. They often take better care of the device when they feel more involved with the device and actually feel a bit of ownership of the device. And this comes by giving them a bit of ability to actually use the device in ways that traditionally people might have thought they might have to restrict them. If we have a look on the right-hand side, you can see what the student application looks like. There's some colorful squares that gives the student the ability to do various tasks. So that orange square actually allows them to see what device it is. They can see all the devices they have listed if they have more than one device associated for them. And they can see all the information about that device. If they tap into that orange square, it's actually a self-service portal. So if there are applications or configuration settings or perhaps even books or PDFs that you want to make available to your students, they can go in here and they can download the ones that they choose. So rather than me deploying every single PDF to every single iPad or every single ebook to every single iPad, the students can actually come into the self-service portal and choose the book or PDF or app that they would like. The other square is that blue square, the updates one. Quite often I get asked, updates, why would we allow students to do updates? Well, this is fantastic because the last thing I want during a lesson is to have a student have an excuse for being off task by saying the app is in the middle of updating, so I can't do any work. We can actually make sure using the Jamf School management system that updates aren't done during the school hours. We can then direct the students to update the applications themselves by going to the Updates tab there inside the Students app. It's a really nice way to involve the students in the device and help them to take ownership of the device. They can actually update apps themselves. We can still push and force that update if a student doesn't do it, but this way we actually allow them to be a bit more involved in the device. We have the messaging application there, so they can have that messaging features with the teachers. This is an optional one that you can turn on and off. And a question I get asked quite often is, do they have the ability to message with each other? No, this is a one-on-one dialogue with the teacher. They can only send a message to or from with a teacher. And the teacher can decide whether the student wants to reply or not. Perhaps it's a message I want to send to the students, but I don't want them to reply. I can do that. Or I can enable it so that students can actually reply to the message. But the students cannot message with each other. And you can also see a square there showing the applications that are available to that student at the moment. So that's the Student app, and hopefully that shows how we can actually involve the student a bit more with the use of the device and help them take a bit more control in the classroom themselves. The final one is the Parent application. So we're actually trying to involve parents at home because a lot of times we're hearing that they want to have some of that ability that teachers have in the classroom. Perhaps during homework hours, when the student's at home with an iPad, the parents want to be able to make sure that the device is restricted. They're only using specific apps or able to go to specific websites. Maybe they want to restrict social media access during homework hours. Well, now we have the Parent application. So as you can see here on the right-hand side, there's some ability with the Parent app to do location-based restrictions. So they're able to use a geofence location, so they could set their home and the school, and they can make sure the device is restricted between those locations. We also have a motion. This came out of the Netherlands for students that were cycling to school. Parents wanted to be able to ensure that their students' devices were restricted while they were cycling to school. And they also have some ability with day and time-based restrictions as well. So perhaps they want to set restrictions during the week that maybe would be different on a weekend. How is this set up? Very simply with the QR code. So if we have a student iPad and a parent iPhone, the student using the student app can bring up a QR code, and the parent using the parent app on their iPhone can scan that QR code. That pairs that child to that parent. The parent is then able to have some of that ability that the teacher has in the classroom. They don't have the full ability, but they have everything that they would need in order to safely allow their students to be able to do their homework without being distracted. So you can see in the example here, they can turn on and off specific applications. You can also see they can restrict based on app category, which is really nice. So if something is listed as a social media application in the app store, then an app can be restricted by category. You don't have to actually specify the name of every single app that they might have on their device. And quite often I also get asked, what about parents that don't have an iPhone or don't have an iPad or an iOS device to be able to use the parent iOS application? Well, very much like the teacher app, we do have a web portal. Again, they can just go to a website. They can do this on any device with a web browser. Again, you'll notice that URL that will be updated in the next couple of months in time for the next academic year. The parent's able to sign in, and they're then able to see the device of their child and be able to manage it just like they would with the iOS application. For this to work, though, they need to make a request to the school IT department because the account and the pairing of the child to the correct parent has to be done inside the Jamf School management system. Because we're not scanning a QR code, it's not easy to realize which student should be with which parent. So they have to put in a request to the IT, and then IT can send them a login. And when they log in, IT has made sure that the correct child is with the correct parent. But as you can see, they're able to then restrict and manage the iOS or the iPad, the iOS device, from any device with a web browser. So recently, this has been really great in the climate that we've been experiencing with students learning from home and parents actually having that ability to ensure that their students are on task and actually completing the work. we've brought out several features over the last couple of months to try and improve and help with this. The first one being a watchOS app. So I think this is a good example of our commitment to the Apple ecosystem and how for 18 years we've done nothing but Apple devices. So we make all of our solutions based around the Apple technology, releasing our first watchOS app to allow parents the ability to manage their child's devices using a watchOS app. It's been really great. So that's how we've been helping the parents. We've also been helping the students with a feature called Raise Hand. So that's now been added to the student application. What does this mean? Well, as a student at home, remote learning, if I get stuck and I need some help with my work that I'm doing, I can tap on Raise Hand. It comes up with a list of the teachers that are available, and I can tap on one of the teachers' names, and it just sends a digital notification to the teacher. So the teacher gets a notification that there's a student that's stuck with a question. So it's really just a kind of a ping and a hands up kind of thing. The teacher can then decide how best they want to help that student. Do they drop them an email? Do they message them? Do they do a video conferencing call with them? How they choose to help them is up to the teacher. This is simply just the student notifying the teacher that they need assistance. And to help the teachers, we've added a section into the teacher app called Help Guides. And Help Guides is a great place for teachers to go to get resources and information along the lines of what I've been talking about today in how to use this technology in the remote kind of learning world. And kind of hot off the press, in the last couple of days, we've released a feature called Remote Class. So this is newly available, and I'll demonstrate that one for you now. This allows a teacher to actually begin a lesson using a VC system, a video conferencing system, through the teacher app. So we've seen a lot of, with this remote learning, use of VC systems, and we wanted to see how we could make that easier for teachers to be able to build into their lesson. So if we look at the teacher iPad on the left and the student device on the right-hand side, the teacher is able to launch the teacher app. They can find the class, and in this example, we have a maths class, I believe. And then they have this ability to have remote class on the top left corner there, that blue circle that says remote class. They tap on that one, they're able to specify a link. So in this example, I'm going to be using my Zoom room, which my short URL is jamf.it/nick, which is my Zoom room. The student gets a pop-up notification. They can go into the student application and they see a blue square called remote class. And if they tap on that, it launches Zoom and they're straight in to the teacher's lesson that's running. So the teacher device on the left, you'll see that there's myself, the teacher there, and there's also the student. And the student on the right can see that they're in that VC room, and they can see the teacher there as well. So making it really easy to be able to share the details for a video conferencing session for a remote learning class. This is an example using Zoom. We do support pretty much anything with the URL right now, but the main supported ones are, if I get this correct, is Zoom, Microsoft Teams, and Google Hangouts. We're looking to add in additional functionality and support for other systems as well that people might be using. We developed a solution in healthcare, patient bedside solution, to be able to help patients in hospitals to have remote calls using other tools as well, such as FaceTime and others. And what we've learned from doing that, we're going to be directly bringing over to the education side and building this out a little bit further. So right now we kind of support Zoom, Microsoft Teams, and Google Hangouts. If you're using something else with the URL, chances are it will probably work, but we're going to look at enhancing this, adding support and building this out to make it even easier. So that's the kind of latest feature that we just added in the last kind of week or two. If you'd like, we have a customer testimonial you can try out. That's the URL there. If you go to jamf.it/remote-learning, you can read a customer testimonial from a school. It's actually a US example, but it's talking about how the school switched to remote learning literally within a day. Within 24 hours, they'd switched everything over to remote learning, and it was a seamless transition, and they used Jamf to do that. That's everything I have for you today. It's quite a lot of information, but I just want to say thank you for joining. If you have any questions, I believe we're going to tackle the Q&A now, Gary.
Yep. Sorry about that. Unmute my mic, everyone. Thank you very much, Nick. Really appreciate that. Lots of stuff there. We'll dive straight into the questions as well. So thank you for everyone who's actually posted lots of questions. Really appreciate it. We've got a few on here that I'll go through now. So the first one is, are there any restrictions regarding which versions of iPad that this will work on? I'm asking because Apple Classroom won't work on certain iPad models. I mean, I could probably answer this one actually, to be honest.
I'm interested to hear your answer. Yeah, does it match mine?
Well, it's kind of the same across all the Jamf products, really. So you can actually look at Jamf product documentation, and it will give you a full list of what's compatible with Jamf School and the system requirements. I'm actually going to send you a private message now to that link. There are minimum supported and recommended, so please take a look at those. I don't know if you have anything else to add on, Nick.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. I mean, absolutely echoing what you say. Check the documentation. We list all of the there's supported and there's recommended. My advice would be to make sure anything's above 9.3 at least, because that's when Apple did that big change with ASM, Apple School Manager. You'll find that any device running an older version of iOS, you're just going to be limited on some of the features. So anything that's been released since that iOS might not be supported. You'll find that maybe half of the restrictions won't apply to a device that's older than 9.3, but the newer version, the better, is always nice, but not always possible.
Excellent. Thank you very much. If we swap from Jamf Pro to Jamf School, are there functions in the latter that we would lose compared to using Pro?
Fantastic question, and a really challenging one to ask, because there's a lot of features in Jamf Pro, and there are a lot of features in Jamf School as well. It really depends what you're using. It's quite difficult, because if I've got 500 features in Jamf Pro and I've got 100 in Jamf School, but I'm using 100 of Jamf Schools and I'm only using 50 of Jamf Pros, am I really getting the best use out of it? It really depends on the environment you look at. The features you've seen today, the kind of teacher, students, and the parent applications, this is all focused on Jamf School. From this, Jamf Pro has a parent application. The parent application doesn't have all of the features that the Jamf School one has, but it has the most popularly used features. And the teacher app for Jamf Pro isn't yet available, although we are actively planning that. So things like that, I suppose. The big one for me, I think we've spoken at length about this, Gary, is things like integrations. A lot of schools want to integrate Jamf Pro maybe with their Wi-Fi network certificates or Active Directory or all of these types of things. Jamf Pro has a longer list of integrations, I'd say, but I'd say have a longer dialogue with academia. Take this offline with them.
Yeah, I think one thing to put in there really to take away is that the Jamf Pro is kind of built for IT professional. School is not so much for someone with all the knowledge to come in and start using it. The integration pieces and things like that, there's a lot more you can do. It's a lot more customizable. And I think really this for me shouts out, the kind of one-to-one school deployment it's perfect for. So it depends on your environment and what you're trying to achieve as well. So the next one, are there restrictions of installing the Teach app as in Apple Classroom? Okay, so I could probably take this one. I mean, well, the Teacher app is different to Apple Classroom app, just so we're clear on that. The Teacher app is actually a Jamf Pro application. Apple Classroom is an Apple application. Apple Classroom, I believe, works on iOS 12 and above. However, there are more requirements for using shared iPad as opposed to one-to-one requirements. I have a website for that as well, which is directly from Apple. So I'm going to send that to you directly as well. I don't know if there's anything else to add on that. It's pretty straightforward.
Oh, so I'll just add on to that. Yeah, absolutely. Shared iPad is a bit of a different one-to-one. For Jamf Teacher, yeah, there's less requirements. You, for example, don't need to have a supervised device. If a teacher has their own personal iPad or their own personal iPhone, they can still use the app. They can download it from the App Store. When they launch the app, they'll be asked to sign in with an account rather than just automatically going into all of the classes, because it's their personal device. They need to authenticate first to make sure they're actually a teacher with the correct credentials. But they don't need to have things like a supervised device. They can use a personal one. A lot of times I'd say I get asked the difference between Jamf Teacher and the Classroom app. I've shown some of the differences a little bit today, but one of the best things is deploy both. let the teachers use both, because as soon as they launch Classroom or they launch Teacher, it'll talk to the Jamf School management system, and they'll see the same classes inside both apps. They just have different ability in each one. So maybe let the
Excellent.
teacher decide. Yeah.
Perfect. Lots of information, which is great. The next one we have is, can we add classes from our MIS to the Teacher app?
Different terms. This, I suppose, SIS or Student Information System. Is that where we're going with something like
Yeah.
SIMS or whatever, or Power School or whatever you're using? So the best way to do this is to sync that into, kind of use that with Apple School Manager. So Jamf School will sync with Apple School Manager, and we can get all of the classes and everything from Apple School Manager into Jamf School. So the best thing is to sync those classes from your SIS or your MIS system to Apple School Manager. Now that can be an interesting one to do. There's a specific tool that's really good at doing that, and really good at keeping everything in sync. So and users as well. So if you create a user, say in Active Directory, if you're using that, or in your SIS system, it automatically creates the user in Apple School Manager, which adds the user to Jamf School. And there's a tool out there that does that really well. I'm happy to plug the name of that if you want.
Yeah, we
But
also work with some companies that help with the automation of that. So also reach out to myself if you're interested. Right, so many questions. I think it's the most questions we've had, Nick, to be honest. So
This is good.
Just good. No awkward silences just yet. So do teachers need to be in school to set up classes? I think you've gone through this one, but if they are planning at home on the school iPad, can lessons be set up?
Yes, so absolutely, they can use that kind of ad hoc class feature, and they can create a class immediately. But if they don't want to use that, they can create lessons inside the Teacher app. That's something I didn't quite touch on today, and it's something I've been planning on making a video on, and I haven't done it yet to release, which is kind of classes versus lessons. What's the difference and how do I use them? But yes, if they have the Teacher app, inside the Teacher app, there's two squares, one's for classes, one's for lessons. They can go into lessons and start building them out. So if I have 3 lessons tomorrow, 5 the day after that, 2 the day after that, I can just sit there and do them all in one hit when I'm doing my lesson planning, which is great. If you have access to the Jamf School management system, you can do it in there as well. But for teachers, typically would say use the Teacher app. The management console should really be for either IT or the person that's responsible from that end. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, we'll move on to the next one. And that is this only operable on school iPads, or a child can use an iPad at home for remote learning?
Good question. Depends, what we're looking at really, but the device needs to be managed by Jamf School. So the student would need to enroll their device into Jamf School. We can make that easy. They can go to a URL and they can just, log in and enroll their device as a personal device, BYO device. The only difference is some of the features you may not get, some restrictions and things might not apply. So it's definitely worth maybe having a longer dialogue about that to see kind of, again, what you wouldn't lose, a little bit like Jamf Pro versus school. It's kind of a BYO device versus a institutional school-owned device. Yes, it's kind of possible, but you don't get the full ability you would on a supervised school managed device. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, nothing to add there. It's pretty spot on. Next one, can we set a home screen layout to tidy up the home screen? I'm going to guess that's a yes.
That's a resounding yes, and it's really nice inside Jamf School. Yeah, Jamf School makes it really easy. If I had time now, I'd show you, but it's really very click and drag. So you get a big like a palette of all of the icons of all of the apps available, and you can just click and drag them onto the iPad screen in the order you want. You can make folders. You can choose which one goes on the dock. And then you hit save and it goes out to all the devices and it configures them. So actually much easier than in our other products to do that. It's a really nice
I was going to say,
interface.
that sounds great.
Yeah.
That sounds really, really
If
good.
only we had it in Pro as well. Yeah.
Yeah. If you want to put that forward, Nick, please feel free.
Yeah, I do. I shout quite loudly about these things, but if anyone else wants to add their them to the weight of it, please do. Yeah, there's feature requests on Jamf Nation. You can add your vote to it.
Yeah, I think I've put a few in there before.
Feel free to send it my way as well. I'm happy to upvote any feature requests on Jamf Nation that people have.
Excellent. I'll be spamming you. So the next one is, does the student teacher messaging app include video calls?
So it's not included as part of it. The messaging feature is really, text message, just like an iMessage text message backwards and forwards. The video conferencing thing is that feature that we've added in called Remote Class. So the teacher can just launch that, but they have to specify, what tool they're using, like Zoom or Microsoft Teams or Google Hangouts. We haven't got anything inbuilt natively to have like a video call, but we're trying to make it easier so that you can actually use those tools from within Teacher app. So whether I'm using FaceTime maybe, or because that's native, or whether I'm using Zoom or something else, we want to be able to put that in the Teacher app so you can launch it through the Teacher app and make it easier for the students and the teachers. But it's not something that we have natively, like the messaging feature.
Excellent. Next one, can you record the lessons when using the video call function? I guess this is it built into Jamf School, or because natively you could use the iPad OS to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. Or if you're using a system like Zoom, or if you're using Google Hangouts, or if you're using Microsoft Teams or whatever, a lot of these services have the ability to record. So that's kind of the onerous is kind of on them to do the recording. We don't do it natively through Jamf. We launch the VC system, and then the VC system does the recording. So yes, but not by us, I suppose is the answer.
Cool. What's the benefits of going to a VC session via Jamf School?
I think simplicity, as you've seen there, it just means that you can actually deliver that link and that to students much easier. The student gets a pop-up. If they miss the pop-up, they just launch the Teacher app and there's a big blue square, and they just tap on that to go into the VC lesson. That big blue square is available only for the lesson or for the time that the teacher sets. So you might, the teacher might say, right, I get a 5-minute window for all the students to join. After 5 minutes, that blue square disappears. Or maybe you leave it there for the duration of the lesson so that, if anyone drops off, they can log back in easily. The idea is just making it kind of one touch, like it's much simpler through the student app for the student to join. And it's really simple for the teacher to then deliver that through to the students, the link to it.
Excellent. And the last one I can pretty much answer. Yes, there will be a video recording of this webinar. Just a big shout out and hello to all the Toucan customers on this webinar today as well. I just want to give it a few more minutes now. So if you do have any more questions, please put them in and we'll stick around for a little bit. I won't play the thank you video just yet because there's loud music, which we might not be able to hear each other. But if you do have any more questions, please feel free to pop them in now. Okay, we have another one come in. Can we demo school while being on Pro? I'm very keen to try it out. I think I'll definitely need to leave this one to you, Nick.
I still say, well, firstly, yes, absolutely. But I'd say reach out to either Gary, yourself, or anyone in academia. We're always in dialogue with you guys. But if someone wants to test or try out Jamf School alongside, absolutely, you can do that. And it's probably a good way to see kind of the difference between the two, and to really understand it yourself. So yeah, if you're interested, I'd say talk to Gary. Yeah.
Cool. That's totally fine. I can get in touch with the relevant people. Excellent. We have another question now, which is scenario question. Excellent. Which is mid-lesson, you realise the students don't have an app that they need. How quickly can you get the app onto their iPads?
Well, kind of bit of a question here, but
It's
say
a
the
broad
app's
one.
already been approved. If the app is already available in the schools, so some schools have like a list of approved apps. If the app is already approved by the school and in that list, and there's a device that's missing it in the middle of a lesson, super quick. The teacher can just load up the Teacher app, select the device, select the app, and say install that app on that device. At that point, it really just becomes on how fast the internet is, to be able to download that app. If the school has a caching server, the app is stored locally on the school's network. They can just install it from the caching server, which makes it much quicker again. But the actual ability for the teacher to launch the teacher app, find the device, and say, put that app on that device is, yeah, can be done in literally, less than a minute. But the install itself is down to the network speeds. If it's an app that's not already been pre-approved and isn't in that list, you can use the app request feature, at which point it becomes, kind of how long does it take IT to respond to an app request. Otherwise, you can push out the app, but they'll need an Apple ID to install it. So hopefully that helps.
Excellent. Yeah, I think that's spot on. Excellent. What I'll do is I'm going to play the thank you video, and I really appreciate everyone joining today. We will stick around for a few more minutes though, so if there are any other questions, please just pop them in the chat. But once again, Nick, thank you for your time today, and thank you for everyone who has joined us.
Thank you all.
Cheers.